Module 6, Lesson 10, Understanding the Types of Speech. At the end of Lesson 10 under Module 6, these are the competencies expected of you. Number 1, distinguish the type of speeches. Number 2, use principles of effective speech delivery in different situations. And number 3, use principles of effective speech writing. If you'd like to assess the level of learning you have acquired in Module 6, Lesson 10, try to go back to these objectives, and in case you failed to meet any of these, let me know so I can explain it to you further. In this lesson, we will discuss the types of speech according to purpose and according to delivery. The principles of speech writing and principles of speech delivery will be discussed in Module 7. Speech according to purpose. A speaker communicates for 5 reasons, which we call the functions of communication. However, a speaker also creates a speech based on the purpose he or she wants to achieve. These purposes are called the goals of speech. It becomes obvious as the speaker shows through the speech what he or she wants to achieve. The speaker, through the speech, can make one think, change one's mind, smile, or laugh. The purposes of speech are studied in order to deepen one's knowledge and learn how to apply them in one's own speech. The 3 types of speech according to purpose are expository or informative, persuasive, and entertainment. Expository or informative speech. An informative speech intends to educate the audience on a particular topic. There are many different types of informative speeches. Such include speeches that describe the conditions of a subject and speeches that instruct the audience on how to perform an action. The main goal of an informative speech is to provide enlightenment regarding a specific topic the audience knows nothing about. It may demonstrate how to use a new type of software, explain a new concept in the field of science, describe an expedition an archaeologist took, or provide details about a person of interest that the audience wants to learn more about. The topics covered in an informative speech should help the audience to understand a subject better and to remember what they learned later. The goal of this type of speech isn't to sway the audience to the speaker's point of view. Instead, the details need to be laid before the audience so that they can make an educated decision or learn about a subject they are interested in. However, it is important for the speaker to think about how this information will be presented. An informative speech should rely less in appealing to the emotions of the audience, which is an important component of persuasive speeches. Instead, an informative speech might rely on visual aids, for example, in order to give the audience a visual representation of important information contained in the speech. Providing the information in multiple forms during the speech increases the likelihood that the audience will retain the information included in the speech. Persuasive speech. Persuasive speeches aim to convince the audience to believe a certain view. A persuasive speech is a specific type of speech in which the speaker has a goal of convincing the audience to accept his or her point of view. The speech is arranged in such a way as to hopefully cause the audience to accept all or part of the expressed view. Though the goal of a persuasive speech is to convince the audience to accept a perspective, not all audiences can be convinced by a single speech, and not all perspectives can persuade the audience. The success of a persuasive speech is often measured by the audience's willingness to consider the speaker's argument. While ethos, meaning the credibility of the speaker assigned by the audience, is an essential part of a persuasive speech, pathos and logos are usually combined to form the best possible argument. While a speaker can attempt to establish ethos or credibility with an audience, it is ultimately assigned to them based on the audience's perception. If the audience does not perceive the speaker as a credible source on the topic about which they are speaking, they will ultimately have a hard time considering the speaker's argument. Logos or logical appeals refer to arguments that present a set of information and show why a conclusion must rationally be true. For example, arguments heard in court are logical arguments. Pathos or the emotional appeal to the audience refer to the appeals that seek to make the audience feel a certain way so that they will accept a conclusion. Entertainment speech. In broad terms, An entertaining speech is a speech designed to captivate an audience's attention and amuse them while delivering a message. Like more traditional informative or persuasive speeches, entertaining speeches should communicate a clear message, but the manner of speaking used in an entertaining speech is typically different. Entertaining speeches are often delivered on special occasions such as a toast at a wedding, an acceptance speech at an awards banquet, or a motivational speech at a conference, which is why they are sometimes referred to as special occasion speeches. However, they can also be given on more mundane occasions where their purpose is primarily to amuse audience members or arouse them emotionally in some way. Remember, when we use the word entertain, we are referring not just to humor but also to drama. The goal of an entertaining speech is to stir the emotions of the audience. Entertaining speeches are definitely very common, that doesn't mean that they don't require effort and preparation. A frequent trap is that people often think of entertaining speeches as corny. As a result, they don't prepare seriously but rather stand up to speak with the idea that they can wing it by acting silly and telling a few jokes. Instead of being entertaining, the speech falls flat. To help us think through how to be effective in delivering entertaining speeches, let us look at 4 key ingredients. First, preparation. Second, adaptation to the occasion. Third, adaptation to the audience. And fourth, mindfulness about the time. Be prepared. First and foremost, the biggest mistake you can make when standing to deliver an entertaining speech is to under-prepare or simply not prepare at all. If the situation is impromptu, even jotting some basic notes on a tissue is better than not having any plan for what you are going to say. Remember, when you get anxious, as it inevitably happens in front of an audience, your brain doesn't function as well when you are having a relaxed conversation with friends. You often forget information. By writing down some simple notes, you'll be less likely to deliver a bad speech. Be adaptive to the occasion. Not all content is appropriate for all occasions. If you are asked to deliver a speech commemorating the first anniversary of a school, then obviously using humor and telling jokes wouldn't be appropriate. But some decisions about adapting to the occasion are less obvious. Remember that being a competent speaker is about being both personally effective and socially appropriate. Different occasions will call for different levels of social appropriateness. One of the biggest mistakes entertaining speakers can make is to deliver one generic speech to different groups without adapting the speech to the specific occasion. In fact, professional speakers always make sure that their speeches are tailored for different occasions by getting information about the occasion from their hosts. When we tailor speeches for special occasions, people are more likely to remember those speeches than if we give a generic speech. Be adaptive to your audience. Once again, we cannot stress the importance of audience adaptation enough in this lesson. Different audiences will respond differently to speech material, so the more you know about your audience, the more likely you'll succeed in your speech. Be mindful of the time. The last major consideration for delivering entertaining speeches successfully is to be mindful of your time. Different entertaining speech situations have their own conventions and rules with regard to time. Acceptance speeches and toasts, for example, should be relatively short, typically under 5 minutes. A speech of introduction should be extremely brief, just long enough to tell the audience what they need to know about the person being introduced in a style that prepares them to appreciate the person's remarks. In contrast, commencement speeches and speeches to commemorate events can run 10 to 20 minutes in length. Speech according to manner of delivery. Besides classifying speech according to the purpose of the speaker, it can be classified based on the manner of delivery or the way the speech is given before an audience. There are 4 main kinds of speech delivery. Number 1, reading from a manuscript. Number 2, memorized speech. Number 3, impromptu speech. And number 4, extemporaneous speech. Reading from a manuscript. In a manuscript speech, the speaker maintains his or her attention on the printed page except when using visual aids. The advantage to reading from a manuscript is the exact repetition of original words. In reading one word at a time and in order, the only errors would typically be mispronunciation of a word or stumbling over complex sentence structure. However, there are further costs involved in manuscript speaking. First, it's typically an uninteresting way to present. Unless the speaker has rehearsed the reading as a complete performance animated with vocal expression and gestures, the presentation tends to be dull. Keeping one's eyes glued to the script precludes eye contact with the audience. For this kind of straight manuscript speech to hold audience attention, the audience must already be interested in the message before the delivery begins. Memorize speech. The advantage to memorization is that it enables the speaker to maintain eye contact with the audience throughout the speech. Being free of notes means that you can move freely around the stage and use your hands to make gestures. If your speech uses visual aids, this freedom is even more of an advantage. However, there are some real and potential costs. First, unless you also plan and memorize every vocal cue, gesture, and facial expression, your presentation will be flat and uninteresting, and even the most fascinating topic will suffer. You might end up speaking in a monotone or a sing-song repetitive delivery pattern. You might also present your speech in a rapid machine gun style that fails to emphasize the most important points. Second, if you lose your place and start trying to ad-lib, the contrast in your style of delivery will alert your audience that something is wrong. More frighteningly, if you go completely blank during your presentation, it will be extremely difficult to find your place and keep going. Impromptu speech. The advantage of this kind of speaking is that it's spontaneous and responsive in an animated group context. The disadvantage is that the speaker is given little or no time to contemplate the central theme of his or her message. As a result, the message may be disorganized and difficult for listeners to follow. Here is a step-by-step guide that may be useful if you are called upon to give an impromptu speech in public. Number 1. Take a moment to collect your thoughts and plan the main point you want to make. Number 2. Thank the person for inviting you to speak. Number 3. Deliver your message, making your main point as briefly as you can while still covering it adequately and at a pace your listeners can follow. Number 4. Thank the person again for the opportunity to speak. And number 5. Stop talking. As you can see, impromptu speeches are generally most successful when they are brief and focused on a single point. Extemporaneous speech. Speaking extemporaneously has some advantages. It promotes the likelihood that you, the speaker, will be perceived as knowledgeable and credible. In addition, your audience is likely to pay better attention to the message because it is engaging both verbally and non-verbally. The disadvantage of extemporaneous speaking is that it requires a great deal of preparation for both the verbal and the non-verbal components of the speech. Adequate preparation cannot be achieved on the day before you're scheduled to speak. That will be all for Module 6, Lesson 10. Thank you for listening.